I, 22 male, suspect something between my girlfriend, 22 female, and my friend, 21 male. We all live together. Am I imagining things? Part 3. Later that night, she sent me a really long Facebook message explaining everything from the beginning, and it sort of made me sick to read. I contemplating not reading it, but once I opened it, I just had to. She said that he'd been flirty with her in the halls. As I mentioned before, he would say inappropriate to both girls, and she tried to be friendly back, but it must have come off as flirting because he kissed her mid-sentence one day. She said she felt guilty that she led him on, and that guilt prevented her from shooting him down in future advances because she felt like it was her fault it happened, and she has trouble saying no. She said they'd only slept together 3 times and she hated it. He had pushed her into it, but I never said yes either, and she was going to end it during the conversation I walked in on. She said she understood if I needed some time and some space, but that she'd do absolutely anything to make it right, and would spend the rest of her life making it up to me by treating me like a king. I'd never have to cook, clean, or do my laundry again, give me full access to her phone and passwords. She even suggested we install Life 360, an app that allows you to track someone's location through their phone, so I would know where she is at all times. Cut off all contact with Mark and all her male friends, just for good measure, I guess. Make up whenever I wanted, yeah. That sounds like a healthy relationship, right? I didn't answer. I kind of wanted to keep her on Facebook and watch the show unfold. She was posting dramatic statuses and song lyrics about mistakes, forgiveness, and some from our song, but I know how I am. I don't want to compulsively check her page or go through old photos, so I blocked her. Derek sent me a text a few hours later saying she's crying and screaming about you blocking her, lol. In happier news, the family I'm staying with is fantastic. I felt a little guilty about taking up their space, electricity, etc. So I offered to put down rent and pay for some bills. I'm unemployed, but my family gives me a decent allowance for rent and food, but they declined. The dad said, "First month's free. If you need more time here, then we'll talk about it," and winked. My friend was telling me that they have hosted his and his sister's troubled friends, so it wasn't a big deal. Still, I'm unbelievably grateful. As for Will, awesome neighbor, I called him to thank him for everything. I wasn't up to inviting him for dinner just yet, but I will. He apologized profusely. He says he can't stand Mark, not just for what he did with Alexis, but various other things that I won't go into. He told me that Mark has been unusually quiet the past few days and told another one of the guys that he had gotten dumped. Whatever. I don't want to think about it. So that's really all I have for you guys. I'm still going to be friends with Derek and Brooke, but I'm going to limit my contact with them because they remind me of Alexis so much. I sent Brooke a message thanking her for kicking Alexis out, and she said she'd do it, regardless of whether or not I'd move back in. She's going to give me a heads up on when Alexis is gone so I can get the rest of my things. In the meantime, I'm spending a lot of time studying, applying to grad schools, and hanging out with the guy I'm living with. Earlier this week, I posted on my university's Facebook group searching for roommates for next semester, and I already have a few replies. I'm going to wait until after finals to tell my parents about the situation, because my mom asks a million questions about everything and I'm not in the mood to answer them. Update 3. Once finals ended, I did well given the circumstances. Everything hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, almost worse than the initial insult. I removed all my social media pictures with her. Threw out stuff that reminded me of her, took our songs off my playlists, yada yada. We've been inseparable since we met, so this was over 2 years of accumulated memories. Long story short, it was very hard, but I had an urge to get it all done before the new year. That whole cliche new year, new me thing, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, one particular Redditor sent me a message about how Alexis might be driven to suicide now that she's lost everything, her closest friends, her boyfriend, and her apartment. I know that seems like an overdramatic prediction, but I couldn't get it out of my mind after reading it. What Alexis did was absolutely freaking terrible, but I felt like a final conversation might give me better closure and maybe help her understand that it's completely over and get her to move on. So I planned to meet with her before everyone went home for break. A lot of you were big on the icing her out, so I'm genuinely sorry to disappoint, but I had to do this for me. I sent, "Alexis, if you want to talk, we can be up somewhere, but there's no way we can be together after what happened, so please don't ask, okay?" She responded almost immediately asking when and where. We arranged to meet at an off-campus coffee place. When I got there, she was already at a table and got up to hug me. I waved her away and she jerked back like a puppy that had been kicked. I felt immediately, but I wanted to get it over with. We made some stupid small talk. She asked how I'd been, how were finals, etc. But I sort of interrupted it. I asked her if she had been unhappy with our relationship. Her eyes got real wide, and she said no, a bunch off times and got quiet. So I asked her why if she wasn't unhappy. Basically, she retold a story about having trouble saying no, and him being so pushy. I stopped her and asked her to cut the BS and just take responsibility. That maybe it excused her actions, up until he kissed her mid-sentence, but 3 times. Yeah, no. She looked down, shrugged, and muttered, "You're right, I know." At this point, she started tearing up and said she was so sorry, that I'd never understand how sorry she was. Then she asked if there was any chance we could be together again, which I was kind of expecting even though I told her not to. I just shook my head. I told her she could still live with Derek and Brooke if she wanted to, but she declined and told me she already had plans to move in with another girlfriend of hers. From here on out, the conversation went in circles with her trying to explain away her actions with her difficulty turning down guys due to her fear of being seen as a frigid, and me trying to get her to admit that excuse was garbage. I don't know why, I just really needed her to stop using that crutch and admit she had ruined a perfectly good relationship with a very real future all on her own. But she just wouldn't. She was always stubborn. Finally, I let it go, and we parted ways somewhat amicably. As I was leaving, she grabbed my hand and parted her lips to say something but ended up shaking her head and letting go. The conversation made me feel worse than I had before at first, but ultimately it really made me see that she was never the kind of person I wanted to be with even without the cheating. She never took responsibility for anything, failed classes were because the professor was incompetent, not finding a job/internship was bad luck and not her lack of effort, etc. I just never really thought about it too hard. I think I was still in the honeymoon stage or something. Something equals I'm an idiot sometimes. So at this point, I leave the coffee place and asked Derek to hang out. I ended up going to the apartment, and although Brooke was there, she mostly stayed in her room. We drank some beers and played some video games. It really cheered me up. We also talked a bit about everything that happened. He admitted that they hadn't been able to find a third roommate. Aside from complete strangers, they'd rather not move in, and asked me again to stay with them. I could tell he really wanted me to, and I felt guilty about them being stuck with the lease, so I accepted. I told him I needed to wait until Alexis took all her things, though. The furniture is hers from before I even moved in, and I still don't want to sleep in that bed. Also, Brooke apologized for getting so involved in the situation and yelling at Alexis. Apparently her stepdad had cheated on her mom, and it's a sore subject for her. I told her I genuinely didn't mind, and she was welcome to do it again if the mood struck her. I also bought some food and drinks at a great place near campus. A lot of you wanted to know the other Mark had done that had so off. Apparently, he had to be harassed to pay rent, claimed he couldn't contribute to any of the household expenses, like dish soap, light bulbs, cleaning supplies, and regularly came in yelling and laughing at odd hours and agreeing to keep it down, then carrying on at the same volume. The standard roommate, really. Well, is a really cool guy. We talked a lot about the situation with Alexis, but also about school and sports. It was actually pretty fun. I eventually did tell my folks about the situation, and as expected, my mom bombarded me with 1,000 questions and cried a lot, so that was fun. Going home made me feel a little better, but my older brother got engaged on Christmas Eve, and given the recent circumstances, I wasn't as excited for him as I should have been, which made me feel like a sibling. Plus, it's all my family can talk about now, and I'm just not in the mood. Life isn't perfect now, but I'm doing better. Alexis moved her out, and I bought a secondhand bed and dresser off another student. I had my first round of classes last week, and although I'm going to sound like a total nerd, the courses are really cool, hands-on, and the professors are incredibly cool people. Derek and Brooke have been really supportive and don't make me feel like a third wheel at all. I saw Mark in the hallway once, and he totally ignored me and I ignored him, but the urge to punch him in the face was very real. I guess that's something that will go away over time. I almost wanted to call him out on the whole thing, but with the kind of person Will had described, the conversation would have gotten me nowhere and probably me off more.